Sara leaned against the window of her small apartment in Berlin, gazing at the bustling city below. The familiar hum of the city, people chatting in coffee shops, cyclists zipping past on narrow streets, and the distant sound of trams clattering on their tracks filled the air. But for Sara, something was missing. A question had been weighing heavily on her mind for months, and today it felt more pressing than ever. How could she speak English confidently? She had always admired people who could switch seamlessly between languages. In Germany, it was not uncommon to meet people who were fluent in both German and English. But for Sara, English had always felt like an insurmountable challenge. She could read it. She could even write it well enough. But the thought of speaking it, especially with confidence, felt impossible. It wasn't as though Sara hadn't tried. She had been learning English since she was in school. Over the years, she had taken countless classes, watched endless hours of movies with subtitles, and even downloaded language apps. But every time she tried to have a conversation in English, her confidence crumbled. Her mind would race, her words would stumble over each other, and all the grammar rules she had memorized so diligently would vanish from her memory. IT was her dream to travel the world, and she knew that English was the key to that. Not just for work or travel, but for opening up to new cultures, meeting new people, and experiencing life beyond the borders of Germany. Yet, every time she tried to speak, a voice inside her whispered, "You'll make mistakes. People will laugh. You're not ready." The voice kept her quiet, but it couldn't keep her dreams silent. One evening, after another failed attempt to speak English during a work meeting with international colleagues, Sara sat at her desk, staring at her reflection in the mirror. "Why is it so hard for me?" she thought. She had seen people much younger than her speak English with ease. Why couldn't she? What was the secret? The first step, understanding confidence. Sara began researching online, trying to find out what exactly made someone confident in a foreign language. One blog caught her attention. Confidence in language is not about perfection. It's about communication. Those words hit her like a revelation. Could it be that she had been approaching English all wrong? Perhaps confidence wasn't about knowing every single word or getting the grammar just right. Maybe it was about being willing to make mistakes, to learn through trial and error. IT was a small shift in her mindset, but it felt monumental. Sara decided to make a change. She would stop aiming for perfection and start aiming for progress. She had been so afraid of making mistakes that she had forgotten the most important thing: communication. The language cafe. Armed with this new perspective, Sara sought out places where she could practice speaking English. She found a local language cafe where people from all over the world gathered to practice languages in a relaxed and supportive environment. Her first day at the cafe, Sara felt a knot of anxiety twist in her stomach. She sat down at a table where a small group of people were chatting in English. Her palms were sweaty, and her heart raced. What if I sound stupid? What if I can't find the right words? But then, a friendly woman with bright blue eyes and an Irish accent turned to her and said, "Hi there, I'm Maeve. What's your name?" Sara's mind blanked for a moment, but she took a deep breath. "Hi, I'm Sara," she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. Maeve smiled warmly. "Nice to meet you, Sara. Where are you from?" "Germany," Sara managed to reply. It wasn't much, but it was a start. As the evening progressed, She listened to the conversations around her, occasionally chiming in with short sentences. It wasn't perfect, but it didn't need to be. Every time she spoke, the words came a little easier and the fear of making mistakes lessened. Embracing mistakes. Over the following weeks, Sara became a regular at the language cafe. She spoke more and more, and each time she felt a little braver. There were moments when she made mistakes. Sometimes she used the wrong word or mixed up her tenses, but she realized something surprising. Nobody laughed. Instead, people were patient, often helping her with the words she couldn't find. One night, after a particularly lively conversation with a group of British tourists, Sara left the cafe with a smile. For the first time in her life, she felt like she could truly communicate in English. She wasn't just translating words in her head anymore. She was speaking freely, even if her sentences weren't perfect. That night, she looked back at the journey she had taken over the past few months. It wasn't just about learning vocabulary or grammar. It was about something deeper. It was about letting go of the fear of failure, embracing her imperfections, and understanding that mistakes were a part of the process. One day, Sara received an exciting email from her company. They were offering her a chance to attend an international conference in London. It would be an opportunity to meet global clients, present ideas, and, of course, speak English. Her first reaction was panic. Could she really do this? Speaking in casual conversations was one thing, but presenting in English in front of professionals was another. But then she remembered how far she had come. She wasn't aiming for perfection anymore. She was aiming for progress. She accepted the offer. The weeks leading up to the conference were a whirlwind of preparation. Sara practiced her presentation in front of the mirror, recording herself and listening to the playback. She joined online forums, speaking with native English speakers, and even hired a language coach to fine-tune her skills. When the day of the conference arrived, Sara stood nervously at the entrance of the Grand Hall in London. The familiar fear crept back, whispering that she wasn't ready. But she pushed it aside. She had learned something more important than grammar or pronunciation. She had learned that confidence wasn't about being perfect. It was about showing up, trying, and improving. The moment of confidence. When Sara stood before the crowd, her hands still trembled, but her voice was steady. She introduced herself, speaking slowly and clearly. As she went through her presentation, she made a few small mistakes, but she didn't let them derail her. She smiled, corrected herself, and kept going. The audience was engaged, nodding along and asking questions afterward. By the end of the day, Sara felt a sense of pride she had never experienced before. She had spoken English, not perfectly, but confidently as she walked through the streets of London that evening. The city lights reflecting in the River Thames, Sara realized that the question that had haunted her for so long, "How do I speak English confidently?" had finally been answered. It wasn't about knowing all the words. It wasn't about never making mistakes. It was about believing in herself, being brave enough to try, and learning from every conversation. And now, the world felt a little bit smaller and a whole lot brighter.